What book most influenced your writing career? Mine is either The Way of Kings,
We know, John.
or All Systems Red by Martha Wells. You see, before I decided to take my childhood dream of becoming a writer seriously, I'd spent 7 years immersed in other pursuits without reading a single novel. The once familiar world of storytelling from my school days now felt foreign. So I ventured back cautiously, reading well-known authors like Stephen King and Agatha Christie, but I knew I was playing it too safe. Then I found the Murderbot Diaries. And 4 novellas and a novel later, I'd rekindled my interest in secondary worlds and started to wonder what else the unexplored territory of fiction had to offer. So yeah, I've got a soft spot for Martha Wells and her lovable sec unit. And today, in celebration of not 1, but 2 novels she's releasing this year, I'm trying out her writing routine. I'll also be paying homage to the fanfiction world where Martha Wells began her writing journey. And that means writing Murderbot fanfic and picking up where the story last left off in Network Effect. And throughout the video, we're going to cover the 7 components of her process. So let's dive into this Murderbot style. So please, no unnecessary social interaction. Just kidding, feel free to comment and all that stuff. So the first thing to know about Martha Wells is that she is a morning writer, and as the birds are chirping right now outside and the sun is almost about to rise, I think this is about the right time. Before this, I was furiously researching and trying to remember all of the details because it's been almost, 2 years since I read a story from the Murderbot series. So, my brain wasn't really up to date. So before we get started, I want to get clear with the idea for what I'm going to be writing. So my grand idea here is that Murderbot, Art, and his crew are journeying to some sort of planet that they've never been to before to try to discover some ancient artifacts that are rumored to be there. But as they arrive at the planet, things immediately go south. I'm not entirely sure about all the details yet because I'm trying to stick to the Martha Wells approach, and she is a discovery writer. So I don't want to come up with the direction for the story's headed necessarily, just the general idea. And from that, and from the character of Murderbot and the character of Art, I'm going to craft this story. So I managed to write a decent amount already here, a full page. Martha Wells uses a daily writing goal of 1,000 words a day, and that's what I'm going to be aiming for. So I am making good progress here, and I am feeling like the story is coming together in a very fun way. One of the main aspects of Martha Wells' approach to writing is that she goes from a character-first perspective. She's focused on having the plot organically stem from the characters themselves. So I spent a little bit of time getting myself in Murderbot's head. Since I've already read everything in this series, it wasn't exactly the most difficult thing to remember how Murderbot speaks. But before I got started writing this, I did listen to a little bit of Rogue Protocol just to re-familiarize myself with the way that he talks so that I'm making sure staying organic to his character, as Martha Wells stresses as part of her process. Things are going well so far. I'm enjoying writing in Murderbot's voice. And also, I have Art as a character in this little story too. So, what more can you ask for with a story set in the Murderbot universe? So I just finished writing this first scene of the fanfic Murderbot, whatever you want to call it. This one was kind of difficult to write. I was getting in a good space with writing in Murderbot's head and kind of how he thinks and how he talks to himself. But then I had to actually write some dialogue between him and Art, and that was a much more difficult part. And the difficulty I had writing these character voices actually harkens back to part of Martha Wells' process, which may or may not be useful for this sort of thing. She talks about how she writes one project at a time. She doesn't like to jump between different projects, and I think this would be useful for keeping a really strong character voice, like, a character like Murderbot or a character like Art. First, I did some research, just reading little parts of Artificial Condition and of Network Effect to see what the dialogue between him and Art was like in those, and that took quite a while. But after finishing that, I was able to write the dialogue relatively quickly. Is it perfect? Definitely not, but I do think it's pretty good for now. So now that that's done, I'm gonna focus on the next scene, which is going to be an action scene, so that'll be fun to write. So it is 7:54 and I have managed to write 5 pages and 1,229 words. And yes, I threw on the word count just here at the end to show you the words because Martha Wells tracks hers and she tries to get 1,000 a day. So writing this story was pretty fun so far. I didn't actually get to write the action scene yet. I kind of set up the action scene, getting things prepared, building the tension as we're getting ready for this big scene. So I do still want to write that action scene, and this actually brings us right to part of Martha Wells' process. She likes to just start off writing something and, give it a little time and see how she likes it. And if the story grabs her, then she will continue writing it. If the story doesn't, then she will abandon it. And I think this is a really cool way of going about this process. So I think I am going to come back and continue writing this story tomorrow because I want to at least get through this action portion. But for today, I'm going to call it here with writing since I've hit Martha Wells' 1,000 word goal and have actually surpassed it. And I'm going to move on to another aspect of her process, and this is reading. And Martha Wells reads really widely. If you follow her on Goodreads, you will already know that she's posting about a book on there, seems like every week, sometimes even more frequently. She's reading a ton of sci-fi fantasy. So I'm gonna come back a little later on to actually read and, maybe read for a few hours and really commit to the Martha Wells reading schedule. So I just finished up the first day of writing like Martha Wells. So far, I found this style of writing rather enjoyable. It's relatively similar to how I write normally, with a little bit less of actual writing and perhaps a little extra reading. But having a little extra reading for the day did make things more relaxing, so I definitely enjoyed that aspect. Tomorrow I will be back to continue writing. I really want to write this action scene where Murderbot is doing what he does best, so I'm looking forward to that tomorrow. So we're back and we're ready to start off with this action scene from Murderbot. This should be very interesting. I've never tried to write an action scene like this before with a character who is using all these different, technical resources during a fight. So it should be cool to write. Let's see what we can do. So this scene was the start of the action, but mostly a little bit more hype building. Basically something that Murderbot thought was going to happen, and what he was planning for ended up being completely turned around, and he had to go against what he had hoped in order to actually engage these two intruders, basically. So the scene ends with him having to expose himself more than he would have liked, and also with the intruders, which are combat bots, taking note of him. So it is 5:54 and I have written up to 1,808 words. As you will have noticed, I already wrote 600 words starting at 1,200 yesterday. So we're already more than halfway through the writing for the day. Writing 1,000 words a day is like super chill for me. I really like it. I think it's good to build up that capacity to write more, but then if you back it down afterward, then it makes the writing feel so much more relaxed. Anyway, let's just continue writing here, going through this discovery process and not knowing what's going to happen, but just trying to figure it out along the way. I took some liberties because I'm not completely aware of all the capabilities of combat bots anymore, or like where their weaknesses lie and that sort of stuff. It's been a little while since I knew that stuff, and I didn't want to have to like research every single Murderbot Diaries book in order to find this one little detail. So I just finished writing the story and it actually turned out pretty interesting. It ended up being 2,764 words, which is obviously more than I was intending, but that's okay. You know, writing 1,000 words a day is actually really nice. By staying under my capacity and how much I can actually write, it does mean that while I'm doing the writing, it's kind of just smooth sailing, it's easy, it's kind of carefree the whole time, rather than, you know, pushing my limits and seeing how much I can write every day. I'm kind of just getting to enjoy the writing process the whole time. So it is a different perspective on writing, and I'm happy that I did this process because of that. I came into this process believing that writing fanfiction would feel really different to me, but I still had some of the same problems as when writing my own world, and quickly got used to writing Murderbot. And so my big takeaway from this process, and the part of Martha Wells' routine that I liked the most, was actually her word count goal. Her having a somewhat modest writing goal, at least when compared to other famous writers, gave me permission to let off the gas a little bit. So rather than focusing on maximizing productive output, I was able to focus on the pure enjoyment of writing.